throwaway account for obvious reasons, and I'm sorry about the long post, but I really need to vent. Me, 34-year-old man, and my wife, 35-year-old woman, have been together for 8 years. 3 years ago, we had a son who is a wild three-nager, but the love of our lives. About a year ago, we made a mutual decision that it was time to try for a second child. She finally got pregnant in October last year, and we were both happy and excited. She took several pregnancy tests a day. We started looking at houses, talked about names for the baby, and planned our future together. My wife started acting weird a few weeks into the first trimester. She was a completely different person, staying in bed all day, looking at her phone, hardly eating, and was apathetic, ignoring our son when he wanted attention, which was very out of character. She said that she was unsure about the pregnancy. I told her it was probably just hormones. She was very anxious while pregnant with our first son, so I didn't think too much about it. A few days later, things escalated. I came home and everything was suddenly wrong. She told me that I worked too much and that I should quit my job. She hated our apartment and the city we live in and wanted to move back to her hometown so she could be closer to her mother. Nothing was good enough. Also, she was determined to have a baby unaliving. She became furious when I didn't agree to her demands, and we had a huge argument where we both broke down crying. I told her that we planned this pregnancy, that she didn't really want a baby unaliving, and that the hormones were just messing with her head. But that just made things even worse. We had nasty arguments over the next few days, where we both said things we now regret. We hardly spoke for a few days. I had a mental crisis, but managed to collect my thoughts while making sure our son didn't get affected by the situation. I sat down with my wife and told her that I would never agree or approve, but I would support her if she was sure about her decision to have a baby unaliving. I also managed to convince her to go to therapy and talk to our general practitioner, GP. They were sadly both pushovers, my wife's own words, and basically just told my wife to do what was best for herself. Long story short, my wife didn't get better over the next few weeks. She was constantly on her phone, texting her friends and mother, who all thought I was a manipulative monster for trying to stop the baby unaliving. She said extremely hurtful things, like that she couldn't believe anything I said because I was just manipulating her and that she planned on moving back to her mother with our son and saw no reason not to. Meanwhile, I was trying to shield our son and did all the housework while simultaneously trying to manage my job. I didn't recognize my wife, and it felt like I was living with a different person. The day of the baby unaliving came, and I drove her to the hospital and waited during the procedure. I could tell my wife was back to her old self as soon as I saw her after the operation. She was crying in recovery, but didn't say much. She broke down when we got home and screamed, my baby," while crying hysterically and clenching her stomach. She cried all night, and the next day she said that I was right all along, that she now understood how sick she was, that I was the only person who saw it for what it really was, and that I was only trying to help. She felt as if another person controlled her body and mind, and it was like waking up from a nightmare. Almost 4 months have passed after the baby unaliving, and my wife got fired from her job due to sick leave. She stays at home all day, lying in bed or on the couch listening to audiobooks. I do most of the housework and take care of our son while working full-time, which has been exhausting. My wife has been going to a psychiatrist who said that she was probably psychotic, and her feelings now are the same as a woman who is forced to have a baby unaliving. She has also been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. She says that she feels broken, and the only thing that can make her whole again is becoming pregnant and having another child. I have a hard time trusting my wife, and I'm very worried that the same thing can happen again. I feel like I can't blame her for the baby unaliving because she was sick. But I'm so disappointed and sad about the situation. All of her friends have apologized to me, but my mother-in-law has said nothing, causing my wife to break contact with her. I feel like my wife is not mentally ready for another pregnancy, that I don't trust her like before, and that our support network from her family is virtually non-existent. My father also died a few weeks ago. He was sick for a very long time, and his death was not a surprise, but it has still affected me tremendously. I feel overwhelmed with my father's death, my wife being depressed and unemployed, while I'm trying to manage my job, take care of the housework, and keep our son fed, clean, and happy. Today, I told my wife that I was on the breaking point and didn't feel mentally ready to try for another child and wanted to wait. She freaked out and started crying, saying that she is extremely disappointed, that she lost all motivation in her life, and that she feels like she lost her one chance of having a second child. I feel so empty and sad. Everything was good a few months ago. My wife was happy. We were expanding our family, and my father was alive. Any ideas on how I should navigate this? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I am so very sorry you and your family are experiencing this. Your situation is scarily similar to my second pregnancy, and this was a very planned and wanted pregnancy with a 3-year-old son. I got pregnant and was happy, and then bam, I wasn't. I lost it. I was horribly sick and depressed. I even wrote my husband an email out of the blue one day, telling him that I was leaving him and getting an apartment. It was crazy. I made an appointment for a baby unaliving because I was out of my mind and knew I was. Luckily, before my baby unaliving, my husband took me to my obgyn, who ordered that I go see a psychiatrist. I was placed on a low-dose SSRI that literally gave me my life and my pregnancy back. Your wife does not need another baby at this point. Please get her to the doctor and therapist to try and stabilize. Your current family is more important than any potential pregnancy. Now is not the time, even if she thinks it is. Direct message me for any support or if your wife wishes to talk or anything at all. Good luck. Comment 2. Sometimes when things happen this abruptly, there's something wrong medically. Has she had a full physical recently? With blood work? Has she had, or can she have, a CT scan or MRI to see if her brain is functioning properly? This is a very strong reaction, and obviously very worrying. Sounds like you're overall doing the best you can to handle an awful situation. It's generally better to validate rather than dismiss feelings. But this sounds so unexpected and out of bounds. You can only do what you can do. Encourage her to explore meds if she's not on them already. Get as much support as possible. Is there anyone who can help watch your son for a weekend? Both of you need a break. Definitely seek therapy for yourself if you can. And, under no circumstances, should you have a pregnancy right now. You're right on that. Maybe not for a year, until things stabilize. Good luck. Now, for the update. Thank you for sticking with me here. The past 2 weeks have been very eventful. Just when I thought things couldn't get more intense, life threw another curveball. My wife, who's been struggling since the baby unaliving, did something that shook me to my core. She secretly stopped taking her birth control, convinced that having another baby would fix everything. I found out when I stumbled upon the empty pill packets, hidden in her drawer while looking for a document. This betrayal hit me hard. It wasn't just the act itself, but the realization that the woman I married, the one I thought I knew inside out, could go behind my back like this. It made me question everything about our relationship. The trust I had in her was shattered. Meanwhile, work has been piling up. My boss has been on my case, noticing that my performance has dipped. I've been trying to keep up, but with everything at home, it's been nearly impossible. I've been staying up late to catch up on work after putting our son to bed, which has left me exhausted. Our son has been feeling the tension too. He's been acting out more at daycare, and they've called me in for a meeting. They're worried about his behavior and suggested he might need extra support. It's another weight on my shoulders, and I'm scrambling to find solutions. Back at home, my wife's mental health has been deteriorating. She's been seeing her psychiatrist regularly, but there's been no improvement. Her fixation on having another child has become an obsession, and it's all she talks about. It's like she's stuck in this loop, and nothing I say or do seems to break it. Her friends who had apologized to me before are now keeping their distance. They're uncomfortable with the situation, unsure of how to support her. It's left us isolated, and I've been feeling the absence of any real support network. Then, 2 days ago, my wife's mother reached out to me. She'd heard about what happened from one of her daughter's friends. We had a long conversation, and she apologized for not being there for us. She admitted she was wrong to take sides without hearing me out. It was a small comfort, but it meant a lot to hear her acknowledge the pain we've been going through. Yesterday, I made a decision. I sat down with my wife and laid everything out on the table. I told her about the trust issues, the pressure from work, our son's struggles, and my own grief over my father's passing. I explained that I couldn't consider having another child until we were both in a better place mentally and emotionally. To my surprise, she broke down. She admitted that she was scared of losing me and thought that a baby would bring us closer together. It was a raw, honest moment that we hadn't had in a long time. We cried together, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were truly connecting. We agreed to start couples therapy. It's going to be a long road to rebuilding our relationship, but it's a start. And for the first time in a long while, I feel a glimmer of hope. Thank you for reading. My best friend proposes out of nowhere. During a trip, and when I laugh it off, he vanishes and ends up in the hospital. So I teach him a lesson on misreading signals. Frankly, I'm still in shock that this happened, so this might be all over the place. Bear with me. All fake names, etc., etc. Jordan and I met in university 2 years ago. We both started at the same time, and because of our ages, we were both considered mature students. So we quickly became firm friends as we shared a dorm, and we'd joke around together about us being old enough to be considered mature in our early 20s. We weren't on the same course, but given we lived together, we would hang out pretty much all the time whenever we didn't have a lecture. We joined a bunch of societies together, went drinking every weekend, etc., etc. It was a pretty sweet gig because it meant we were at least never alone. Obviously, we made other friends, both alone and together, but we were always each other's number one at the end of the day. At the moment, we're on spring holidays for Easter, and while we haven't hung out constantly, we decided to make plans to visit each other's hometowns because we're from very starkly different places. Today, we went to mine. Mine is a big city central. This morning, we went there, and we're wandering down the streets, doing some sightseeing because he's never been. There's typically a lot of street sellers here trying to sell you everything from hot dogs to fluffy Pokemon hats. I decided I wanted to get a caricature done. I've never had one, and I thought it would be funny to get and hang over my bed when we got back for the term. I asked Jordan if he wanted to get in, and he refused. No worries, so I sat down to get it done. They don't take very long, 5 to 10-ish minutes. So I stayed, looked straight forward at the artist the entire time. He finished the caricature. I loved it. So obviously I turned to show it properly to Jordan. When I turned though, I literally don't even know what to say. He's down on one knee, holding up a ring box. I don't even really know what he said. If he did the whole proposal speech thing. Because I was so confused, I was barely paying attention. Remember, this is a super busy tourist city, so this has drawn a mini crowd now, coming over to cheer us on. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. To be honest, I thought this was some kind of odd prank type thing. We never have been prankster types or whatever, but I couldn't come up with a reasonable explanation. So I just laughed and laughed and laughed. Until I looked at Jordan, and he looked genuinely heartbroken. So obviously I asked him something along the lines of, "You're not being serious." This is the only thing I remember him saying. He shut the box, stood up, shrugged, and said, "I guess not anymore," and walked off. This left me standing pretty awkwardly in this gathered crowd of people, a lot of whom were giving me dirty looks, which made me incredibly uncomfortable. The plan was to meet back up at a hotel that we had booked rooms next door to one another. So I figure that's where he's going and head back that way. But he's not there. So I wait, and he still doesn't return. I text him out of concern. This was at 1:15 p.m. It's currently 6:20 p.m. as I'm writing this. Just asking if he's okay. He responds with a long message back, which I would post because it's an odd read. But I won't out of respect for his privacy, in which he basically accuses me of leading him on, asking why I didn't break up with him sooner, saying I had publicly humiliated him, and that he thought I loved him the same way, and that he felt our relationship was strong enough to consider taking the next step. Now, this is completely out of left field. I literally have got no idea where in the world he's got this idea from. The closest we've ever physically been is a hug hello and goodbye. I've never even jokingly flirted with him. For exactly this reason, I've had too many friendships collapse because they can't tell the difference between serious interest and joking banter in friendships. So I've been extra careful to not. We've never kissed, never been on a date, never had intimacy. I do not find him physically attractive, and I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with him. I don't understand where on earth he's got this idea that we are. This isn't something he's ever brought up before this, and I'm genuinely bewildered. He hasn't returned to the hotel yet. I periodically knock to check, and I've been listening out for him walking up the hallway or anything. Nothing. I haven't responded to his long paragraph because, honestly, I don't know how to. I'm just so stunned and taken aback that I genuinely have no idea where to go from here or what to do. I haven't told anyone I know in person yet, mostly because I don't want to bring this up to people who know Jordan. So here I am turning to strangers on Reddit instead. What in the world do I do? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I have a close male friend. We went to a Christmas fair together one year. We were not holding hands or linking arms. A stall owner began talking to my male friend about the jewelry the stall sold and how they would make great engagement rings for you two. I thought my friend was going to die of sheer shock and horror. The speed at which he set this man straight was hilarious. Your friend appears to genuinely believe you are a couple. I concur with those saying to try contacting his family. I understand it might seem dramatic, but it might be wise to contact the police. You are not reporting him missing per se, but you are telling them you have concerns. Note, I am not American. I am aware the cop suggestion could be a terrible idea in some states. Edit, corrected typo. Comment 2. OP, I am definitely concerned about this guy's mental state because you have done everything correctly, by the book, for friendship standards. You have never crossed boundaries and have separate rooms for obvious reasons, not even having intimacy conversations. He is not in reality. Please follow up on here so we know how things work out. Now for the update. Thank you for sticking around for this update. Frankly, I'm still in shock that this happened, so this might be all over the place. Bear with me. All fake names, etc., etc. Since my last post, things have spiraled in ways I couldn't have predicted. After Jordan stormed off, I was left to navigate the awkward stares and whispers of the crowd alone. I tried to laugh it off, but the weight of the situation was crushing. I had to get out of there, so I headed back to the hotel, hoping Jordan would show up and we could talk this out. But he didn't come back. Not then, and not for hours after. I was worried sick. I kept texting him, each message more desperate than the last. But all I got back was silence. I didn't know if he was safe, if he was hurt, or worse. It was like he vanished into thin air. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. The hotel room felt like a prison, and the silence was deafening. The next morning, I got a text from Jordan's sister, asking if I knew where he was. My heart sank. He hadn't gone home. I explained what happened, and she was as baffled as I was. She told me about Jordan's past, how he'd been in a serious relationship before that ended badly, and how he hadn't dated anyone since. I never knew. We never talked about our love lives much, but I had no idea he was carrying around that kind of baggage. Hours turned into days, and there was still no sign of Jordan. I was torn between feeling responsible and feeling angry. Why would he think we were more than friends? Why would he put me in this position? I started to question everything about our friendship. Had I missed the signs? Was I too naive? Then, on the 4th day, I got a call from the local hospital. Jordan had been admitted. He was okay physically, but he was in a bad place mentally. I rushed over, my mind racing, with what I would say, how I could fix this mess. When I saw him, he looked so small and lost. It broke my heart. We talked for hours. He told me he'd been in love with me for months, that he'd misinterpreted our friendship as something more. He was so ashamed, so embarrassed by his mistake. He'd wandered around the city for days, not knowing what to do, until he'd reached a breaking point and checked himself into the hospital. I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that he was safe, and guilt for not seeing his pain. We made a pact to work through this, to rebuild our friendship, but I knew things would never be the same. The trust was broken, and the easy camaraderie we once shared was replaced by a cautious dance around each other's feelings. The rest of the holiday was spent in a strange limbo. We went back to the hotel, packed our things, and headed home early. The trip to my hometown was supposed to be fun, a break from the stress of university, but it turned into a nightmare. Now we're back at university, and it's like we're strangers. We pass each other on campus, exchange awkward nods, but the laughter is gone. I miss my friend, but I don't know if we can ever get back to where we were. I've learned a hard lesson about the fragility of friendship and the consequences of miscommunication. I'm trying to move forward, to make new friends, to find a new normal, but it's hard. Jordan and I were a team, and now I'm flying solo. Thank you for reading. My ex-wife thought I was crazy. But when she learned about my brain tumor, she came crawling back. So I showed up at her wedding to support her brother and showed them both I'm better off without her. My 32-year-old ex-wife divorced me in 2022. I was devastated, but I couldn't blame her. We had been together for about 6 years, and for a while, we had an incredible relationship. We had a memorable engagement in Belize, a long story involving bats, getting stranded at the Mayan ruins where I proposed to her, and being rescued by a passing British military exercise. But that's a whole other story. I won't wax poetic about it, but suffice to say, it's the happiest I've ever been. And I think I made her very happy too. She was my best friend, and we were ready to spend the rest of our lives together. I was extremely close to her whole family as well. I was her brother's best man at his wedding. But then the trouble started. My mental health took a steep decline. My behavior was extremely erratic and bizarre. When we were in public, I often thought I was being followed. One time I became convinced listening devices had been implanted in our home. I thought the police or government agencies were after me and monitoring my devices. My wife finally dragged me to the emergency room after one of these incidents, and I ended up getting diagnosed as having a psychotic break with bipolar and schizoaffective disorder. My wife stood by me through it all. But even on treatment, I continued my strange behavior and thought patterns. There was lying and substance abuse. Previously, I'd only ever drank socially and occasionally smoked Zaza. It was all very out of character for me. I'd always been a very stable person, but I seemed to be spiraling. One day, my wife had enough and told me she wanted a divorce. She'd caught me lying about drug use. For a while, I maintained contact with her brother, who tried to support us both through it, but eventually he cut me off too. In the year following the divorce, I tried emailing and texting my wife and her brother, but eventually I got the hint. Mutual friends dropped me too. I couldn't blame anybody. I think additional lies and misbehaviors had come to light, so I was a pariah. I sank pretty low, lost multiple jobs, and barely scraped by. Fast forward to now. I'm still struggling, but I've managed to hold a good, well-paying job and even bought a few properties. I got a new little pup named Archie who keeps me going when times get tough. I've kept at therapy, and it's definitely helped. But recently, while traveling, I suddenly collapsed. I went to the hospital, and when the doctor heard my history, he immediately ordered an MRI. The look on his face and his whole demeanor spooked me, like he suspected something that he didn't want to tell me. But he insisted on just waiting to see and not speculating. Lo and behold, I have a brain tumor. The funny thing is, when I found out, I was relieved. Finally, it all made sense. Apparently, it's not unheard of for such a thing to be misdiagnosed as bipolar. The doctors say it's probably been growing slowly for a long time and explains my strange and out-of-character behavior. Thankfully, they think it's treatable, and with surgery, I stand to make a good recovery. So how do I move forward with this? I want to try to reach out to my ex-wife and her brother, but maybe they've moved on with their lives, and I shouldn't try to reinsert myself. I've done enough damage as it is. They don't seem to want to have any contact with me, but I also feel like they should know. They may have blocked my number and email, but I do still have some mutual friends I could reach out through. For all I know, my wife is in another relationship, and I shouldn't reopen those wounds. But if the roles were reversed, I'd want her to let me know. So how should I move forward here? What, if anything, should I say? Now, for a few comments before the update, Comment 1. When you say they may have blocked your number and email, do you mean you know they have, or you aren't sure? Write a letter. It can be an email or a snail mail letter if you have their addresses or know a friend who could hand the letters off. It will allow you to say all of your piece without any pressure for them to respond. Then, let go of the outcome. She might respond and want to reconcile. She might respond but have moved on romantically. She might not respond at all. But if I were her, I'd want to know, even if I didn't want to get back together. Otherwise, I would always wonder what had gone wrong. Comment 2. I would let them know through mutual friends. Write a short email. Label it. Finally got the right diagnosis. Express your gratitude for their support. Then explain why nothing worked. Let them know the next steps for your recovery, and then let it go. They supported you for a long time and will likely be surprised and relieved and host a whole spectrum of feelings. I would want to know if I was them. No idea if they will want to touch base with you, but opening the door can't hurt. Now, for the update. Thanks for all the comments on my last post. So, I decided to reach out to my ex-wife and her brother about my diagnosis. I thought they deserved to know, considering everything we'd been through. I sent a message through a mutual friend, and to my surprise, my ex-wife responded. She wanted to meet and talk. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind where you can actually hear each other. She looked good, but there was a tension in her eyes. I told her about the tumor, the relief of understanding my past behavior, and my upcoming surgery. She listened, her face unreadable. Then she told me she was engaged. It hit me like a punch to the gut, but I managed to smile and congratulated her. It was clear she had moved on, and I had to respect that. Things at work were going well, but my health was a ticking clock. The surgery was scheduled, and I was scared. Not just of the operation, but of facing it alone. Archie was a great pup, but he couldn't exactly hold my hand in the hospital. Then, out of the blue, her brother called me. He'd heard about the meeting and wanted to clear the air. We met at a park, Archie tagging along. He admitted he'd been harsh, cutting me off, but he'd been protecting his sister. He also said he'd be there for me, as a friend, through the surgery. It was more than I expected, and it meant the world to me. The day of the surgery arrived, and her brother was true to his word. He was there when they wheeled me in, and when I woke up, groggy and disoriented, he was there too. The surgery was a success, but the recovery was brutal. I had to relearn some basic stuff, and it was humiliating and frustrating. But he stuck by me, and slowly I got better. Work was supportive, giving me the time I needed to recover. I focused on getting my health and life back on track. I sold one of the properties to cover medical expenses, which stung, but health came first. Then the real test came. My ex-wife's wedding was approaching, and her brother was in a bind. He was the best man, and he wanted me there. Not as a guest, but to support him, like he'd supported me. It was a tough ask. Going would mean facing all those old friends who'd turned their backs on me, seeing her marry someone else. But he'd been there for me when I needed him most. I wrestled with the decision. It would be easy to say no, to avoid the pain and the awkwardness. But that would mean turning my back on someone who hadn't turned his back on me. In the end, I decided to go. It was the least I could do. The wedding was beautiful, and yes, it was hard, but I was there for her brother, and that was what mattered. I kept to the background, offered a quiet congratulations to my ex-wife, and left early. Some people were polite, others ignored me, but I didn't let it get to me. I was there for one reason, and I'd fulfilled that. After the wedding, things settled down. I focused on my health, my work, and Archie. I didn't try to rekindle old friendships, but I didn't push anyone away either. Life was quieter, but it was good. So that's where I'm at now. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day. Have a great